Originally, in German, strafe means to punish. And in World War I, English-speaking soldiers adopted that term to mean bombardment. That's typically how you and I would use it and know it today.
Sure.
To strafe is like a bombardment run. How I'd like to introduce it into the podcasting lexicon is for when a goddamn episode begins, and I click on the episode, and the episode says, today we're going into the history of coffee beans.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm like, yes,
Hell yeah.
Fascinating.
Wanna
Can't
learn about
wait to
that.
learn
Yeah.
about coffee beans.
For sure. Same.
And then I hit play on the episode, and then for the next 27 and a half minutes, the host is talking about his camping trip with his family last weekend. And the episode starts with them saying, how was your weekend, my guy? Tell me all of... And I'm like, I'm here for the history of coffee beans. What are we talking about? Why do I care about your kid being allergic to marshmallows?
It's also rough because I listen to some podcasts that are like world history and world news, and it'll be like, so today we're going to be talking about the horrific like genocide and all this stuff. And before we get into that, did you see that sports game on Friday? Like, oh man, yeah, like that's,
God.
oh yeah, oh, and going camping this weekend. Oh, very cool, nice. Where to? What great.
This is such a personal pet peeve of mine. And it again, the history of podcasting comes from radio, comes from talk show, comes from blah blah blah, and so like, so many shows inherit this idea that they need to like talk about themselves or something, and not just like get to the main focus or create like a tight focus scripted research product, whatever. That's my personal beef. I could talk about that forever. I'd like to call that, when podcasts do that at the beginning, waste my time with all of this nonsense, strafing. It is the act of strafing. You are punishing me with a bombardment run of your bullshit that's not about what I'm here to learn. Strafing. There you go, folks. When a podcast wastes my time at the start, they're strafing.
Pull back the curtain a bit for listeners. As we kind of developed Gom Jabbar, and over the first couple of years, that first few minutes of the episode started getting longer and longer as we like had more and more housekeeping. I felt firsthand Abu's resistance to strafing. He was like, we're getting close. We've been 4 minutes and we haven't started talking about the thing we promised people we'd talk about.
Breaking out in hives.
What are we fucking doing? So I am so glad to now have a term for this, that we've been avoiding strafing this whole time.
Yeah.
And we will continue to, as best we can.
And podcast listeners, longtime podcast listeners know exactly what this is. But if you're like a fairly low-key, normie podcast listener, you'll start hearing this everywhere.
Yeah,
like,
true.
Pay attention. So many shows will do this like strafing run at the start for no reason.
Yeah.
And it's unnecessary. They could cut that and the episode would be like 10 times better.
I mean, again, I think me getting into, when we started making this podcast, listening to some of the other Dune podcasts, but also just sci-fi podcasts, they'll have like a targeted episode and then they talk about something else for 45 minutes. And I'm like, I really chose to listen to this episode based on the title.
Yeah.
And I feel lied to. So strafing.
Okay.
Excellent.
So there we go. I'd like to introduce that officially into the world of podcasting.
Hell yeah.